Hello everyone, and welcome to the Side of the Desk podcast. This is our 8th episode, if you can believe that. Each month, as you know, we chat with influential industry leaders to explore their journey to success and, more importantly, the role recruitment played throughout. Now, we're currently streaming live on LinkedIn and YouTube, so you can watch, listen instantly, or if you can't join us today, you can register, subscribe, and we'll get the information to you as well. I get life is busy, but here we are for you now. Now, joining me today for episode 8 is David Ogiste, who is the co-founder of Nobody's Cafe. David's passion for uniting people started at 16, if you can believe, hosting parties. Now, he's turned this into a successful career, working with clients like PlayStation, British Airways, and Pepsi. And in 2020, he founded Nobody's Cafe, which is an award-winning brand experience collective. Now, they've collaborated with Amazon, Netflix, Spotify, and Trivago, just to name drop a few, and they bring people together through creative activations. So welcome, David, to Side of the Desk. Anything you want to add to that? Anything I missed or didn't say properly there?
No, that was all great. So yeah, I started at 16 when I was just hosting house parties, really. That's what I used to call my brand experiences with the house parties, and then that just led to my love for events and the industry we're in. So, yeah.
That is crazy. I love hearing stories like that. Now, listen, just before we do get started, we are streaming live, which means people share your comments, thoughts in the comments box. Introduce yourself, tell us where you're coming from, and we'll, get some replies over to you. So let's kick straight into it. And you alluded to it then. I'm assuming you're not 16 any longer, David. So
unfortunately not now.
You said about there, you said 16 when you started, and I think quite a lot of people talk about events, look, we fell into it. But you sort of came into it from an early age. And what? Well,
it was like the way I look at it is it was always just that goal of bringing people together. Like that always sort of like I just had a passion for that. So even that was like doing house parties and just bringing friends together. Like it was always there. And then straight after, I actually in sixth form did an event that we tried to like bring people into a venue in a bar, and it got shut down because there was too many people that were underage. So trying to do that in sixth form. And then when I got into university, that was working for like student nightclubs and doing a lot of like nightclub events. So I did that for quite a few years. And then off the back of that sort of like led me into more of a client side brand activation, where it wasn't kind of just doing events, which I still look as like brand experiences because it's still a brand and people are still going there for that brand. But it was more started working with more clients like your PlayStations and your Cadburys and whoever else I've worked with over the long years, because I'm definitely not thinking anymore. Wish, that'd be nice. But yeah, so it's been quite a long time really, and it started after sort of the nightclub side of things. Started working at an agency in Leeds, then just sort of worked my way through that. Then another agency, still in Leeds, and again was a bit more senior, dealing with different clients. And eventually moved over to, I forgot where it was. I lived there for 2 years, Dubai. So I was in Dubai for 2 years. That was an incredible experience. And that was when I had presentation as a lead client. And then London, I was at RPM. So quite a well-known sort of experience agency. And then I went client side. So I moved from agency to client side, which I would recommend everyone gives a go.
Divide, did you? You crossed the divide.
Across the table to the other side where the agency's pitching at me instead of pitching to clients. So that was very interesting. I think it provided a lot of insight though of being like a client and what it's actually like working for a brand rather than trying to be an agency side and pitch to a brand and work for them. So that was really interesting. And then here we are, kind of Nobody's Cafe started 2020, June 2020, and now it's June 2020, nearly June 2023. Time flies.
It's funny that divide, though, isn't it? Because obviously, you know, I've been event side as well as recruitment side, but there's always that sort of, you know, creative corporate. You know, there's always like a mix, and like corporates think creatives spend money, creatives thinks working for the client is easy, and clients think, look, corporate, you know, and you can sort of go one way, but then sometimes it can be hard to come back, can't it? It can be like, I think once you go corporate or client side, agencies get a bit like, oh no, or you know, it's just an odd thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I think going to both sides, and I think once you've left agency, once you're client side, very few sort of client side people want to go back into agency. And
it's the power, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. And so some agencies side love that agency environment. And I think there's something to be said for both, but what I do believe is, like, once you're client side, you understand so much more of that sort of dynamic where you, as an agency, when you're working in an agency, you might sit around in the agency and think, oh, the client hasn't made a decision, but actually internally, there's so many different layers that you kind of need to go through to make a decision. And although there isn't sort of like the North Star in the same way there is an agency. In an agency, the North Star is, what does the client want and how do we deliver what that client wants? So when they ask for it, that's what you deliver. You find the way and you deliver that. So everyone's sort of pointing towards the same thing. And don't get me wrong, there's still internal like shifts and which client and all of these things and budgets, etc. But in client side, it's not actually like that. And so sometimes it's like these different departments that you need to bring together to point towards the activation that you want to do. But although you think in a client, oh, we all should be pointing towards this activation, actually one department's pointing in a totally different direction, and it gets difficult, and you need input from that department to make a decision. You've got your agency chasing you, but actually you've got no ability to give them a decision. So you're just kind of like, sorry. And the agency kind of thinks you're just holding back, but you're not really. So it's interesting, that divide. But I'm glad I've been on both sides.
Well, if we can take you back to being David, the 16-year-old, when did you feel, when you were doing those house parties and then sort of getting to the student parties, did you sort of feel there's a career, or were you just doing events because you enjoyed it? And if you did, where did you get to a point where you're like, oh, I could actually have a career here?
I think that's a tough one. Like, yes and no. I think I saw there was potential with the nightclub stuff that I was doing. I saw bigger companies that were doing it all over the world, and there were a company called Scintillate, which some people might know. They still run events in London and Marbella and lots of other places, and they were doing very well. So they were sort of someone or a company I looked towards as like, can I do that and build that? But then also part of me was like, do I also want to be standing on the door outside a nightclub at a certain age? I don't know if I personally want to do that. And obviously, as the company grows, you build people and they do that, but you're still in that world. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to be. I think I then, while I was still doing the student and events nightclub side of things, I was working as an estate agent for a little while, and it was finding this role as at an experiential agency where it kind of like clicked a little bit that it wasn't just you create a nightclub experience, but there was starting to be like more experiential client side brand experiences, because like 16-year-old for me was quite a while back. So like the events industry that we have now, sort of like the brand experiences that you see posted every day, there wasn't really as much as though there is now. So like, and it's continuing to develop. I was having a conversation just yesterday about like this experiential brand experience. Like, events aren't new. Like, of course, events have been going since the beginning of time, but actually like this brand experience, experiential is relatively new. And so we've always been sort of like trying to get the budgets of TV and media and those like traditional spends. And as those traditional spends have changed because of social media and content just being everywhere whenever you need it, because of those like experiences taken on a new platform. And I was comparing like where we are now is kind of the, you know, the TV show Mad Men, which was all about sort of like the marketing agency in the 60s, which was kind of like in its infancy of what marketing could be and what it developed into. We're still kind of in that for like brand experience, experiential. We're not at that crux where it's like, this is what we definitely do. But I think as things develop, we will be a lot more established and more people can see it as a career that they can get into from an early stage, rather than what for me it wasn't until I landed upon this job and then realized, yeah, there was more to this than just doing nightclubs. So,
and I think you're absolutely right. I think the biggest problem we ever had was experiential became everything. When experiential was leaflet dropping, nightclub to a £2 million activation. I think that's changing. But right, let's just talk. So we're getting to Ayona. I have to ask, where does the name come from? Nobody's Cafe. What does?
So it's actually inspired by a bar. So a bar in Latin America about 100 years ago, where like creatives and artists, poets, actors, musicians used to come together, and they used to hold events in a sort of way to elevate culture in that time. And the bar was called Café de Nadie, which translates to Nobody's Cafe. And I just love that spirit of like bringing people together through events, which is what they were doing in that bar. And also just the idea of creatives coming together to elevate culture. It kind of spoke to what we're trying to do. And we bring creatives together to deliver these experiences. We bring people together to the experiences, and with the brands that we work with, we keep on trying to sort of elevate culture and everything around us. So it just spoke to me. I read it in a museum, and it just literally just spoke to me months before I even started the company. So I had the name maybe a year, about a year before I even started the company. I just knew it was going to be, it was something. So I just, So,
I love that. And how did that? I mean, obviously, you know, we'll get on a minute. Your passion, your drive is still there. We were talking offline about, you know, LinkedIn, and that's sort of where I sort of, you know, met you, found you, if you will. And I love that, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But so when your career's going along, you know, you said about agency, you said about brand, you've done that. You know, where do you get to in your mindset to go, actually, I'm going to do this on my own? And also just because it's a collective, isn't it? It's a little bit of a different approach than a business, like, you know, as you would imagine. So tell us, like, where did that come into? What was the jump for you to make yourself? And just give us a bit of an overview to it, to Nobody's Cafe as well.
Yeah, so at the time, it was something that I'd started to get sort of frustrated with some of the places that I was working. And that wasn't because of them; it was more because of me personally. I just kept on feeling like there was a bit of a ceiling in the places I was, and I also felt that. Just in the industry, in terms of like diversity and areas like that, like I wasn't necessarily being represented at the higher level of these companies. So it just felt internally to like there was something that I needed to do. And then the pandemic hit. I was made redundant from where I was at the time, and I just thought like that everything was kind of aligning to say that you need to do it now. And so that's where I sort of took the plunge. And that sort of collective side of it it's more about like our transparency as well as a business. It's about how we kind of like, a lot of agencies do work with freelancers, do work with external suppliers, but they kind of like white label a lot of them. As the sort of like clients that we work with and the suppliers that we've worked with can attest to, we're a lot more open about like who we're working with, the expertise that they deliver, how they're bringing that to a project, the freelancers that we work with, and all of those bits. So that there's been times that some of the freelancers we've worked with have gone on and done other jobs with the brands, like without us involved, because I think it's about that collective nature of like, we're all in this together, rather than sometimes feeling a little bit sort of like the the client and the agency is like, there's a divide, and then there's behind the curtain, there's all the people and the suppliers that you're working with to deliver something. It's great to just kind of be open. And I think in the sort of like world we live in now, where everything is accessible, it only takes a Google to find a photographer or to find a supplier. So where we come in is delivering that expertise over years of working with some of these people to help align all of that. We're not here to kind of like use a Rolodex from 20 years ago where we've kind of like hidden all of our suppliers and you can't find them unless you find our Rolodex. That's gone. There's, as you just said earlier, there's LinkedIn, there's Google. There's going to be more and more. There'll be AI soon enough where you can probably write up like who should I speak to, or chat GPT or whatever it might be. So it's just about like actually feeling like there's a collaboration between everyone involved, not just the agency and the client, but like everybody's on board with what we're delivering. So yeah, that's kind of how it all came about, and that's that collective approach that we take.
I love it. And you know, it's with someone like yourself that's had quite that sort of eclectic and diverse background, stepping over the divide, if you will. Yeah. The podcast is about recruitment around you as well. So during that period, like what part has recruitment played? Either you recruiting or being, you know, recruited by people. How have you found that? You know, what's that journey been like for you?
It's been a strange one. So when I started, it was like 2008 really. So it was like recession, no one's hiring anything, and people are kind of like searching around, and even like the recruitment sector wasn't in a great shape because nothing was in a great shape at the time. So yeah. some of my dealings at that point weren't amazing, like with recruiters. But then as like the person that found me that client role was through recruitment, and that was an amazing experience. And I think like with anything, it's about how you sort of the people you work with, and how you navigate that. Some are better than others, and that's just the case of everything and every business out there. And it's sometimes I think people will say, oh, recruiters are this based on one experience with one person, and it's just unfair for one, and it's just not true. Like you can have a bad experience, but you can also have an amazing experience the next time you have one. And it really, really depends on working with. Sometimes even the client that they have as well. So that they can have a client that isn't giving them the information that the candidate might need or might want, or isn't giving them the feedback. But it's really hard for the recruiter to go, like, yeah, like the client just isn't giving me that. It's really difficult. So there's some sides of it like that. Sometimes it has been where I've just gone direct. So my role that I got in Dubai, I emailed them just out of the blue, just said, do you have a role available? Here's my CV. I think it took about 3-4 months of like discussing with them, and eventually I got the role. But that's rare, to be honest with you. Like it's that's not something that happens very often. And even when I got there, they were like, this is pretty rare that this has happened, but it all like, stars aligned and bits like that. And then obviously now I recruit. So it is something it's a shift, and I've been on both sides. I've been recruited and I now recruit. And I think it's a difficult thing to navigate as an employer now, rather than being an employee. I think when you're an employee, there's obviously roles that you want to get, and sometimes you might get frustrated if you're not hearing back. But as an employer, there's a lot to sort of navigate in terms of picking who do you think is going to be the right person, because a lot of it is like it's sometimes bit of gut instinct of who do you think is going to be right and who's going to be the right fit. And there's so much you can do with when a candidate's presented to you to understand that person. And sometimes it can be, sometimes you take so long that the candidate feels like, why are they taking so long with me? I'm going to move on and go for another role. So sometimes you've got to be quick, but you've also got to sort of balance that out. So it's a tricky thing to sort of navigate as an employer. And obviously with recruitment firms that help putting candidates forward and do a bit of that due diligence for you, it does help on that side, because you know that you're getting someone that's a little bit that's been through some of the questions you may ask already, and you know that's there. And that doesn't mean you don't still need to interview them and go through a process, but it helps them as well as it helps the employer. And that's when I got my role client side, that I'd been process, I'd met with the recruiter and I'd done those. But then some of the ones that weren't great, like it wasn't like I'd necessarily hadn't been through that sort of pre-interview, pre-conversation bit. And then sometimes you're just getting put forward for roles that they don't know you're right for because they haven't had that conversation with you. So it's been a mix, but I think that's just any industry when you've been in it for a long time as well. So,
And if we think about all the jobs you've had then leading to where you are now, and this is interesting because I think a lot of people still want to come into the industry, which is fantastic. I think there is still a little bit of a disconnect still between what people think the industry, and I'm talking about events, experiential, not recruitment. There's a little bit of a disconnect. Just talk us through, like, what's some of the best jobs you've had, and then what's the worst thing you've found yourself doing in the events industry.
So I'll go through some of the best. I've been able to travel the world because of this industry and because of this career. Not just to Dubai. I did an event in Nepal for PlayStation, where I got to go to Kathmandu, like hiking through like the valleys of the mountains of Kathmandu, and going to Monkey Temple, and all of these things that I got to do for PlayStation, that realistically, when you put that in terms of other jobs that you might do in the world, there's not many that get you those sort of experiences. Again, Lebanon, I've been on the side of a mountain quad biking, because we had to test out the track before the people taken on this event.
Health and safety is what that is, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah, 100%. We needed to check that out, so we had to go around on our quad bikes to check that out. So those things, like some amazing campaigns that I've done over time. Been to Austin, Texas, did South by Southwest, done things in New York. So done things in Cannes. We did stuff. Nobody's Cafe did activations for Spotify in Cannes last year. So amazing experiences there. I've done stuff in Paris. So all of these things that come with this industry, and that you don't get in many industries. And also, not only are you doing what you kind of love, and I do love it. Not only are you doing that in these amazing places, you're usually around some amazing experiences in general. So South by Southwest, amazing. Cannes Lion, amazing. And you don't get as much of it because you're working, but you do get a little bit of it while you're there. And being out in Kathmandu and some of the stuff I saw out there, like I'm never going to forget that. So all of those have been amazing. And then even some of the things that we've been able to do with Nobody's Cafe, we did an event last year for Netflix, which was about accessibility and diversity and inclusion within the film industry, because then there was a lot of stuff being talked about around sort of Little Mermaid and around Lord of the Rings, and they had The Witcher Blood Origin, which had a really diverse cast, and we pulled together an event which was probably the most accessible event that I've ever put on, just in terms of, we had sort of braille signage that we'd done. We worked with two charities, LGBTQ plus charity and a disability charity, to make sure that we were providing all the access and all the sort of language that we needed to do. We had interpreters there, we had live captions, all of these things that we brought into this event. And then the people at that event that felt included for the first time, like coming up to me and saying, thank you for doing this. And like it meant so much. Like I had to hold back tears at an event because of like the impact that it's having on those people. Like that is the power of experience, the power of the events industry, the power of brand experience, and that's the amazing stuff that I love. It's not always easy to do it though, and so sometimes like you're working late at night or you're starting very early in the morning. So like that side of things, I slept in a shopping center on a stand because like one of the parts was missing and we had to stay with the stand until it was all done. So I'm there in a stand in Abu Dhabi, falling asleep at 3 a.m. just literally lying back, like no cover or anything like that. So you know what I mean? So it's not always easy. I did an activation once a few years ago now for an FMCG brand. We were going around sort of county fairs. We had a supplier that let us down, and I get a call while I'm about 2 hours away, about to drive down. Oh, the stand doesn't look how it should. I'm going. See you later. That was the sort of response from the supplier. So I get down there, have to like on my own, have to move all of these things around, and it starts raining and you're out. But we eventually found like the right equipment, like calling around, and it resolved it, and everything was fine. So those are the things that come into it. It's not a plain. If you want a plain sailing, it's going to be like this on day one, like this, day 2, day 3. This industry might not be for you because that's not really what it's like, and there are problems that you will need to solve along the way, but you are doing things that are totally different every single time. So what we were doing in Kathmandu was totally different from what I was doing at South by, was totally different from New York to that Netflix event that we did in December, to what we were doing for Spotify in Cannes. All of that, like dealing with New York ice cream brands that we were bringing over from New York and taking them to Cannes, and like meeting them, and all of these kind of the things that come with it, and the connections you make as well, the people that you meet. So for example, that ice cream brand, guy called Morgan Stearns, taking him over to Cannes, and then few months later, I'm sat at dinner with him in New York, just like chatting about like the partnership and all of these things that like come off the back, and all the people that you've met, even yourself and I, through being in this industry and LinkedIn, and how that can bring people together. It's an amazing thing.
Talking of meeting people and getting together, I can't let you go without asking about Stormzy. I saw that in the intro. What was that? I assume that was an event, was it, or is it just a panel?
Yeah, that was an event. That was an Adidas event at Seoul DXB. Also, my haircut on that original video, like that needs definitely looking at. It was like just post lockdown, so like
don't get me started.
Yeah, so I wasn't going to the barbers as much. But yeah, met Stormzy, and he was a really great guy. Like one of my favorite things to have happened.
You must be really tall, because he's massive, isn't he? So you must be quite a big fella, David, because you look like.
Well, that was part of it. Like if you see the interaction. So so I'm 6'7", and I think he's about similar height. And so I've gone over to sort of say hello, and he's like, I don't really meet anyone that's as tall as me. I don't really. He said to me, he's like, do you know what to do? It's like, I don't know how, like, for a photo. So eventually, that's why he puts his arm around me, because he's like trying to feel like, what do I do with someone the same height? So no,
he's like resting on him like that, is he? He's like leaning on you. Oh, brilliant.
No,
well, listen, just to move on, just that event you mentioned for Netflix, it'd be really interesting if you could afterwards maybe share like a show reel with Naomi, the producer, and we'll put that out there, because we had Meg Strahl on recently, who's the inclusivity manager, I think it's called, and sustainability at the Bulb. And I'm a great fan. A lot of the stuff I do with EDI, there is very race specific. We talked off camera about the scholarship, but it's always good to share those things, maybe ideas that other people can pick up, because that would be really awesome. Right. Okay. So we mentioned about the hot seat. Sorry. So what I'm going to do now, relax and take it easy. I'm going to ask you. I'm going to say 7 things to you, one at a time. So the idea is it's word association. So literally, first thing that pops into your head. It's not an interview question. I had Tanique on the other day, and she really threw me, because she gave me these wonderful like answers, and I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. I just thought it was like mucking about. so it's generally just to sort of see
we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, no, we'll just give it a go.
I'm not used to just saying one-word things, answers.
I'll probably hear you. But it's not an interview question, I suppose, what I'm trying to say. So Naomi will do a little VT, and then I'll come back and we'll crack on with it. There we go. That was incredible. Right. So, are you ready, David? Are you ready?
I'm blessed.
Right. Here we go. Word association. What comes into your head when I say the word recruitment?
Moving on to a new career.
Oh, I like that. Interview.
Meeting new people. Just relaxed. You meet someone new and you just chat with them.
Very nice. Good so far. I like that. My favourite one, recruiter.
Can be very helpful. Can also not be very helpful.
I think you meant to say we need really good ones like Robert, and that was what I think.
We do need really good ones like Robert, who will be very helpful. But there's some aren't, so you need to go with Rob because he will be. There you go.
We'll cut that, and that's it. The rest of the show I'll get rid of. We'll keep that. And talking of obviously that as well, salary. What comes into your mind when you hear the word salary?
Oof. Try and get the biggest one you can.
Very much so. And that's obviously what your recruiter should do as well. Yes. Job descriptions.
Useful sometimes, but usually they're not worth the paper they're written on once you're in the company.
And what about the word talent?
Hard to find, but great to hold on to.
I love this. And last one for you, event professionals.
Some of the best people in the world.
Oh, do you know what? That was brilliant. That was how I was hoping that would kind of go. So thank you for that.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Good.
So just before we did, I don't think we've got an outro, so I'll just keep going until I get a message from someone. But before we did that, we were just talking about, where you got to. You were talking about some of the stuff you've done, some of the really interesting, exciting stuff. And you mentioned there about inclusivity at the events, and it's okay. There was a video, so it came up. Fair enough.
No worries.
Where we are at the moment, we have moved on. We mentioned the pandemic. Personally, I try to be positive about the pandemic and think there's a lot of stuff that came out there. You talked about community and us coming together. Where do you think we are now? What do we need to change? If you had that one magic wand wish sort of thing, what would you change in our sector at the moment right now?
There's a couple of things. I think inclusivity and diversity is probably a big one for me. I think we are miles and miles away from where we need to be. Just not even just in the events experiential industry, but probably the marketing industry as a whole. But I think in events and experiential, it's probably worse within the UK anyway. What I've seen throughout my career and what I see now, sort of stepping back and looking at other agencies in more detail, and sort of like looking at talent and where that talent's coming from and all of those things, and sort of looking at senior talent in a different way. It's not good enough, and I think brands are starting to realise that as well. That it does need to get better. Brands' internal teams are quite diverse. Most of the teams that I've worked with have had that diversity like run through them from top to bottom. But like when you step up the agency side of things, you're not seeing it in the way you should. And when I talk about diversity, it's not just race, disability, LGBTQ, gender. Like there's a big mix when I say diversity. I think from my side, I obviously associate and sort of connect more with the race element of that, because being mixed race, being black, I see it in a different way. But it's the whole melting pot of diversity within the industry, and that's what I think really needs to get better. And the problem is, and the conversation a lot of the time goes towards, well, we need to do education and we need to bring people into the industry, and it needs to, but then it's sometimes what happens when those people are in the industry. And I think that's the problem that people keep ignoring. Because my dad, it was said at the same time for my dad when he was growing up in the sort of 60s, 70s, it was like, oh, well, we need to educate people to get them into these industries and get them in there. But then they get into them and there's this huge like ceiling that they can't get beyond that ceiling. And so then when I'm growing up, it's like, oh, well, we need to do sort of like what they call positive discrimination. And we need to like bring more people into these industries. And then that happens. And like, but then there's still that ceiling, you know what I mean? And I experienced it as well. And like, it wasn't an education thing. I've got a degree, I've got experience, I've even got like second degree. But so it's not.
Now you're just showing off, David. Now you're showing off.
But it's not an education thing, you know what I mean? Like,
no, you're absolutely right.
So if it's not an education, and and that's now what's still being said, and so it's like, so it's not an education thing because there's people that are in industries that have proven that it's not education because they've got the education they were told that they needed to get, and they've still got that ceiling. What is it? And I think that's the problem, like, because people don't necessarily want to go into industries that they don't see themselves in, and and that's where this sort of like, it's hard to get people into it because the people that are in it are a bit disillusioned by being in it. And sometimes they go off and do their own things and consult, or they move away from some of these bigger agencies. But those bigger agencies are the ones with the budgets. They're the ones that can help with some of these sort of like scholarships because they have that money and they have those funds. But then the people they're not seeing themselves when they think, oh, I'd like to work there because I see myself being able to get onto the board when the board looks nothing like them. So I think that's the problem we're facing.
You've hit the nail on the head because we talked about the reaching, and obviously what I do a lot of work with universities talking about talent pipeline, and actually the talent pipeline coming into the industry is actually, I think I read, so it's sort of 60-40, 60% white and 40% underrepresented minority. So actually the people coming to the industry at university level is a lot higher. So we don't really have a problem. But you're absolutely right. And I get this at senior level. I get people, we're looking to me, we want a shortlist that's more diverse. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not a thing I can help you with, because I could go and get you a diverse shortlist. But if you're asking for 15 years worth of experience at senior management level, you're going to get me, or me as a woman, and I think we could get rid of it overnight if we stopped asking for 5 years worth of experience for a junior Progco, or 2 years experience for an 18 grand PM or something, and to me helps EDI. And I had a conversation where I won't obviously say their name, the client, but we were talking about, inclusivity. And I was sort of trying to explain that if you're not set up to be an inclusive workplace, you can put all the people in that business you want, but you'll just lose them because you're not ready. And I think that talent pipeline, when I go into the unis, the sort of, I can't think of the word for it, but the joy, the love, people seeing this, for example, seeing you, not just as a black man, but seeing the stuff you've talked about, the excitement you've got for the industry, that generates passion for people coming in. That's an easy thing. You talk to kids saying, I've met Stormzy, I've been to Dubai, I've been, they want to do that sort of stuff. And then they come in and we sort of go, all right, there's just get on with everything we've always done. So yeah, it's really interesting. And I think you're probably the first person, second, I do a lot of work with Gabby at Diversity Alliance, but you're probably the first person that recognizes that, like, it's not just about recruitment, it's about a culture. Because I can't wait until we stop seeing it as a trend or a something. And it's like, it shouldn't be something. But I obviously have a very different experience of the event industry than a lot of other people because of who and what I am. So I do really get that. But no, I really appreciate that. Thank you for that, David.
Yeah, no problem.
So talking about changing, what do you see? And I think you talked about ChatGPT offline. That really freaks me out. But apart from things that were changing, which we've talked about, what's exciting? What are we saying to people? This is really cool that's happening right now. This is what you're seeing. What do you think is the most exciting thing happening in our sector at the moment?
I think what the exciting thing about our sector is that people are realizing how powerful our sector is. And I think what's exciting, and it was already happening, and I've seen the change. Like I said, when I started when I was much younger, and now I'm seeing what's changed. But I think the pandemic and people being inside has made people realize like that connection and experiential and experiences is really important, and that is exciting for the people coming in, because you are going to start delivering better and better work than's gone before you, and you're going to get the opportunity to be part of things where originally, like, some brands would just do a sampling campaign, and no, nothing wrong with doing a sampling campaign, but like those same brands are now looking at like, how do we do it where we engage people, and we're not just handing out, here's a sample, here's a sample, here's a sample. Like, let's take them on a journey. Let's tell them the story of our brand. Let's take them through an experience. Like, it's much more like experience, really. There's more experience around it, and that's building because brands are really understanding the power. And I think that's exciting, that where we're going to be in the next 5 or 10 years with this, when people understand and more brands understand the power of what we do, is really important. I think with AI and chat GPT, all those elements, they're going to enhance what we do. But I also think, because what's going to happen, and this is my Elon Musk, what I foresee in the future might not come true. But what I see with all this AI is like, it's going to create so much content. There's just going to be the ability to create even more and more content. And we've already got a lot of content. But what's going to happen is the content that can be created, people aren't going to know if it's real or not. And I think the only way you're going to know if it's real, like, and we're seeing that with like Drake having a song out and it's not his song.
Right. Wow.
The only way you're going to be able to know if it's Drake really performing is when you're at the experience. So your only way you're going to know if a brand doing something or if they are who they say they are is when you meet with them in person, when you're at that experience. And so I think the influx of content that's going to come off the back of AI and ChatGPT is going to enable event producers to do some amazing things. And it's also going to enable the consumer to think, right, I actually want to go out and be part of this now. I don't want to just see it on my screen. And that's also still going to be part of it. I don't think everyone's going to smash their phone and then that's it. We're all going to just do everything analog again. I think they're all going to just integrate together. But I do think, like, the worth of a TV ad, when there's just like that could be made in 2 minutes. Like, I don't know if it's going to be as powerful as they were. Whereas I think experience will still always hold that power. Because the way I always look at it is, when you get to the end of your life and you look back on your life, it's very, very unlikely you're going to look back on that TV advert you really remember. It's more likely you're going to remember an event or an experience you were at, and brands have the ability to play into that. So, and we do as the producers, to create that for a person to go, I'm never going to forget that. The people that went to that Nepal experience for PlayStation are never going to forget it. And I was able to help facilitate that. And that's something that'll stay with me forever as well.
That's great. It's brilliant to bring it into experience. I mean, I love technology. I've seen, as a recruiter, we've been told we're going to be, replaced for the last 50 years. But genuinely, AI is the only thing that actually scares the shit out of me. Like VR and NFT, all the other stuff, I've always thought, yeah, great, embrace it. AI scares me, like where that could go. But anyway, I'm an old boy. Right. Okay, so I really appreciate it, Dave. Now, obviously, there's a lot of, I can almost see the edits that Naomi's going to mention. You've really given some really nice insight as well. What would be like the last thing I'm going to ask you? What advice would you give to people thinking of coming into the sector, any type of person, of any background, but what advice would you give for people either coming into the sector or actually maybe thinking about your journey, maybe setting up on their own? So you choose what you want to do, or both.
Yeah, well, coming into the sector, I think you've got the ability from a young age to have experience in it in a way that you potentially might think you don't. So when you are at university, if you are studying an event management course, put on an event for your friends, for the university, like, have that experience and do that on your own. And in terms of like where that could take you, like, try build that into like a small little business that you're doing for friends, find a venue and just get a DJ, and that will help you understand some of the bits that go into events. It's not going to help you understand everything. That comes with experience, but understanding just those little bits while you can, before you even go into the sort of like workforce and out of university, do that, because I think that gives you so much experience. I got so much experience from that before I even went and started in my career. And then what I'm very happy that I did is I didn't jump into starting my own agency or starting this. I actually had a lot of career experience before I did it. That's allowed me to learn so much from each of these places I've worked and for each of the brands that I've worked with, and had the ability to work with them. And that is invaluable. And I think what I see a lot now is people rushing to try and start that business, and they can't work anywhere. I think Gary Vee once said, if you've ever worked somewhere, you're not an entrepreneur, which is absolute nonsense. Like those kind of comments, I think, push people into something that they might not be ready for it. And if you are ready for it, amazing, go do it. But if there's nothing wrong with working somewhere, I was employed for 12 years or longer before I decided to start my own thing. And because of that, I learned so much from every single place I was in. I also made loads of connections because of all of these companies that have already started something. Because when I started on my own, it was really lonely, because I'd gone from meeting all of these people to now it just being me and figuring out, and then bringing on a co-founder, and then it's like there's another person there. Sorry, someone's doing something on the roof there. You might be able to hear. We're coming to the end, so it shouldn't be too bad. But those kind of like, it can be really lonely. So if you do that when you're 21, it can be a really lonely experience. So meeting people, getting those connections so that you know more and you're more connected when you do start something, there's nothing wrong with that as well. So don't feel like, oh, I've started in a career, therefore I can never do it. Not at all. I think that would be a big piece of advice for someone coming into it.
Brilliant, and thank you. And I think, that loneliness as an entrepreneur, we don't talk about that enough, but thank you so much for that, David. That was amazing. I've really enjoyed getting to know a lot more about you. As I said to the audience, sort of seeing you online, you get to sort of think you know someone, and not only are you exactly what I thought, I knew we would have fun today. So thank you for that. I'd advise everyone, go and follow David on, I know on LinkedIn. I'm sure David afterwards share your handles with us and we'll put them out there, but follow David. His content's really different. It's really enjoyable. It's great to consume. I know you've shared so many ideas and insights, so thank you for that. I'm sure people listening and watching have got a bit of a deeper insight for you, and obviously your love for the industry. For those of you watching, we stream live on LinkedIn and YouTube. This is going to be available for eternity. Stay updated for the next episode via my LinkedIn profile, and turn on notifications to be reminded. I want to thank everyone for joining us. David, any final comments from yourself?
Just it's been great being able to have this sort of chat with you. I've really enjoyed it. And again, we didn't really know each other. We knew each other through LinkedIn, but we didn't know each other. But it's been great to actually have this conversation. And same to the people I know that they're already following you, but just staying engaged with the content that you're doing, because I think you're saying a lot of really interesting and good stuff about the industry and helping push it forward. So no, it's been really good talking to you.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks so much. So that's a wrap for episode 8. Remember, there's enough BS in the world already, so please treat recruitment as a strategy and don't dump it on the side of the desk.